I awoke feeling like I'd been dragged out of a dark pit. The room appeared vaguely familiar, but in my condition, I couldn't remember where I'd seen it before. A tube was painfully jammed up my nose, and the noise of voices dragged me. Into focus, I recognized my wife, Karen, demanding something from someone in a white coat. "How is he, and what happened to him?" she inquired in an urgent tone. I felt a flash of hatred. I was angry with her, but I couldn't recall what the doctor in the white coat said. "We don't know what's wrong with him yet. We'll run some tests in the morning to determine if his heart is damaged, and we're getting ready to sedate him so he can relax peacefully tonight. We'll keep him in the ICU and monitor his status. He'll continue on oxygen." I felt a prick in my arm, which felt constrained somehow. In a few minutes, I sank back into the dark, familiar emptiness. When I woke up, it was morning again. The nurse was adjusting an IV hook to my arm. I looked around and realized I was in the ICU. Karen was curled up in a chair near the window, sleeping again. I felt mildly annoyed, but couldn't remember why. The nurse noticed I was awake and asked, "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. How are you feeling this morning?" I replied, "I am feeling groggy." Holding a straw to my lips, I took a mouthful of water. I believe the sounds of our talking must have roused Karen up. I woke Karen and Jake. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "I am terribly sorry." I was still a little blurry when I woke up, so I tried to recall anything that would explain why I was here. Then I remembered the previous evening and what had provoked an overwhelming wrath. Like a light bulb lighting on in a dark environment, I screamed at Karen to get the hell out of my sight. Karen glanced at. With horror, alarm bells went out around me, and the nurse was instantly, in a frenzy, trying to calm me down. "Thompson, please calm down, Mrs. Thompson. You're going to have to leave right away," she murmured as she adjusted her. Seconds later, I sank back into the dark void, and the last thing Karen was sobbing as she left the ICU. When I woke up again, it must have been around midday, because the room was flooded with sunlight. I heard my older son Mark's voice. "When can we find out how he is physically? The family is. I'm also concerned about his mental health. He should wake up shortly, and the doctor will get him started on some tests to establish the state of his heart and other vital indicators. As soon as this happens, we should have a feel for his bodily condition later this afternoon. As for his mental condition, I recommend you or a family member accept Mrs. Thompson sit down and talk with him. From what I've heard, he's had a severe reaction to your mother. We're asking her to stay away until the problem in their marriage is handled. It may require a psychiatrist or marriage counselor. Right, doctor? Thank you very much. I'll be the speaker for the family in place of my mother." "I understand." Turning towards my bed, the doctor said, "Oh, good, Mr. Thompson. I see you're awake. Start the testing right away, Dad. How are you doing? Can I get you anything?" "Yes, you can keep your mother away. Me and tell John Parker I want to meet him as soon as possible." "John Parker, your lawyer?" "Well, Dad, if that's what you want. I'll try to get him to meet you tomorrow. But you need to explain this to us, Mom. I'm having a bit of a tough time at the moment, so I'll try to get up with you later about it." How did this all start? To understand why I'm so angry at my wife of 25 years, I have to go back to 12 years when I realized that she was having an affair nearly ruined me. I believed we were happy, and I loved her more than anything. We had 3. I had a terrific job and my children were wonderful. Mark, 12, Sarah, 10, and Lucas, 8. Wife Karen, age 35, worked part-time before I discovered her affair. Had been working at a bank as a teller. I had already observed a few things that made me suspect there was something wrong in our marriage. Our sex life had nearly. I completely halted when I glanced in her purse for our checkbook and found a motel receipt from the previous Tuesday. I was gone on business. I also found a pack of condoms with 2. I found a motel receipt placed in a secret compartment encouraged me to dig into her household finances while she was working. On that Saturday morning, she always handled the finances and paid the bills, so I wouldn't have an excuse to. Looking over our records, I discovered that the charges on one of our credit cards were 2 times the prior month's cost for the same motel out near the airport. The dates matched up with times I was out of town on business. She was meeting someone else, so I wondered why she was paying for the accommodation. I also discovered her lover, another woman, cell phone bill, and found a number that had been phoned so many times that I didn't recognize this was more than just. My chest tightened and I felt queasy, so I walked into the bathroom and sat on the toilet seat to see if. While I waited, I wondered if she was actually cheating on me and why she would do so if I wasn't providing her with enough of my love. Our sex life was excellent. I believed I was just making myself crazy with unknowns I had to find. Fact, after a while, the emotions of nausea and anxiousness passed, and I decided to. I scheduled a meeting with our lawyer, John Parker, on the following date. Tuesday, I didn't say anything to Karen but tried to be normal, but when she suggested she wanted sex, I couldn't respond to her and blamed it on the pressure of a new project at work. She seemed to accept this and appeared happy. Just to snuggle against me, I took the day off on Tuesday to see John, who was startled that Karen may be engaging in an affair, but he informed me that if I wanted to be sure and have enough evidence of adultery, I should engage a qualified private investigator to obtain the essential information and photographs. He also informed me about my restricted rights to custody of the children and suggested that it would be cheaper and better for the children if I confronted her and convinced her to end the affair in order to keep the marriage and family together. I agreed to evaluate all he told me, but I would have a private investigator document the affair. As soon as I returned to my office, I called and scheduled an appointment to see the investigator Sam Davis the following day. When I informed him about the facts I discovered, he was very keen and stated my concerns might be right. He also, the claimed tryst with our lover occurred on days I was out of town, and he requested when my next vacation was set. I informed him that I was planned to be in Houston for a meeting the following Tuesday and would be leaving Monday morning and returning on Wednesday. Stated he'd focus his attention on the one motel implicated in the prior alleged tryst. He also intended to tap our home, phone, and set sound activated audio recorders in her car and in the house. Then he inquired if my wife knew about my future trip. I told him I only found out about it that morning and hadn't had a chance to notify Karen yet. I told him I had just learned out about the trip and hadn't had a chance to inform Karen yet. So he stated he wanted. I knew she was at work, so I had immediate access to her car and our house to place the recording devices. Be in the bank car lot, so we headed over there immediately soon. He placed the sound-activated recorder under the driver's seat. Then we headed to our house, where he tapped our phone and hidden many wireless small mics about the house with a receiver and recording device in an open shed behind our house. He stated he might have an acquaintance pick up the tapes. Daily while my wife was gone from the house, I gave him a he requested for a spare key to Karen's car, according to an associate. When he was finished, I found the number in Karen's cell phone record and stated I'd look into who had it. I then went back to work that night after dinner. I told Karen about my scheduled business trip, and she appeared upset. That I'd be away again, that tight feeling in my chest and my feeling of sickness were with me at all times. While waiting to hear from Sam, I had to act like a loving husband if I wanted to maintain the pretense. That weekend, I had sex with Karen to keep her from growing suspicious about what caused that. Sweetheart, we haven't had sex like that since before, and I thought I'd let you know how. I adore you and recognize how much you mean to me and the kids. I truly value that, Jake. Occasionally, I suppose I'm just being taken for granted. If there's anything you need, please let me know. I appreciate everything you do. Keep our marriage and family together. Thank you, Jake, and I will certainly let Y. Oh, after that she laughed. I'm going to miss you while you're gone. Keep me in your thoughts while you're away, honey. I don't want you to stray. I've always been true to you, and I don't plan to stray. It's reassuring to know, love, that you're being a decent girl while I'm gone. This was a moment of truth, and I believe she didn't hesitate. Yes, love, I am just interested in you and the kids. As they say, you and I have the perfect marriage, and the beautiful family should never be messed up. I completely agree with you. Now I need to get some sleep. Exhausted me right out. Good night, sweetheart. She gave a small wink in her response. I may have got her all wrong this. The following week will tell the story. I attempted to get to sleep, but I was tossing and turning all night with visions of her screwing some guy in a motel room. I went for the airport on Monday morning after kissing Karen farewell as usual, I told. Before leaving, I pulled up to the curb around the corner and felt myself start. I told our kids to behave and mind their mother. To hyperventilate, I took out a paper bag that I had brought along and inhaled into it. I was practically normal for a few moments and continued on my way, but I had a difficult time concentrating. Business, but I try to keep concentrated so I wouldn't have to think about what Karen may be doing while I was away. On the return trip, I had to go to the toilet twice with my paper bag to calm down. My anxieties when I arrived home on Wednesday evening. I tried to seem natural, but I think she realized something was wrong. I avoided her welcome kiss and merely let her peck my cheek. Is there something hurting you, Jake? Acting weird even before you left on Monday. I believe it's the stress of a new project at work. I informed her, wanting to avoid any further talk of what might be troubling me. You've never let anything at work affect you before. It's a special endeavor, and I might earn a significant promotion out of it, if I'm honest. You're troubling me. Would you want to take a volume? They help me when I'm nervous. Okay, I'll try half of one first. My assumption was that they might be better and less noticeable than the paper bag after taking the medicine. So I waited. After a time, I felt myself returning. I took a long breath and relaxed. Is that better, Jake? Yes, much better. Thank you. You like to come up to bed now that I have sent the kids over to my parents for the night? It was a straightforward request for sex. But I didn't think I'd be able to answer until I heard from the pie. After that, I didn't think we had a chance. Again, I was so weary, honey, and I just wanted to sleep. She did look sad and anxious, but I didn't know whether she was concerned about my health or that I sensed something. Perhaps the pie would find nothing wrong and thus would all go away. I arose early the next morning, showered, and dressed for work. I hadn't slept well because of anxious energy, so I assumed the medication had worn off before leaving the house. I located her pill container and took some with me. After downing another half tablet, I stopped at an overnight. I had dinner, breakfast, and a cup of decaf coffee. Then I was ready for work at 9 o'clock and couldn't wait any longer. So after closing the door to my office, I called Sam to find out what had happened while I was gone. This is Jake Thompson. What can you tell me about? I was planning to call you in the previous few days, Jake, but I felt it would be better if I came to your office this morning. I'll give you a brief overview of what we found so far. I can be there in 15 minutes, Sam. Expecting you. I told my secretary I'd be gone for an hour, so if anything comes up that I need to know about right now, just give me a call on my mobile. When I came to Sam's office, his secretary waved me in. Sam up and shook my hand. Said, I imagine you're anxious to know we found out, so I'll get right to it. Your wife, he told me, was having an affair without any preamble. I was really astonished. I remarked, I'm worried it's more than that. It appears like she is completely involved with her lover and is submitting to him sexually, and with pain as a key incentive. He put in a series of still images on his desk in front of me. I saw my wife of 13 years naked on her knees, tied to a bed with a huge whip. There was also a picture of her with two men while she was on her knees. Realized why I hadn't seen her naked body for a while. I instantly felt terrible and had to rush from Sam's office below the hall to a toilet where I vomited up my breakfast and more. It took some time to recover, and I took another half. Before returning to Sam's office, his secretary gazed at me sympathetically. When I returned, I picked up the photos while I was gone and put them in an envelope. These are only the preliminary ones until I hear from you about how much more you want us to do. We've got a video of the whole Tuesday evening. He handed me the envelope. He added, when you think you're done with our services, we'll generate a final report for you and a copy for you. Oh, and we found out that her supervisor is John Harding, a vice president at the bank where she works. I was still in shock, but the loudness was keeping me quiet. I could think with some right, Sam. I'll let you know what I determine I've got. I will inform you that I returned to my workplace to consider my alternatives. After I told my secretary that I didn't want to be disturbed, I walked into my office and shut the door. To make a decision that would affect our marriage, family, and our children, I sat in my office the rest of the day without left, even ignoring lunch. My secretary realized something was bothering me, and she was correct. My boss came down to see me a couple of times to check in, and Jake, I know you've got some troubles. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. Why don't you take the rest of the day off and go home? I appreciate your care and offer, Jerry, but I think I can work this out on my own. I know we all wish you the best, he said me as he closed the door and departed. He said I was there till my typical quitting hour, and by then I'd worked out what I wanted to do on the way home, so I took another. I had half a Valium and felt calm when I entered our house. Karen met me at the entrance and tried to kiss me, but dodged away. Jake, she said, What's the matter, Karen? I'm going to take the kids over to your folks for a while, and we can have our conversation when I return. She became pale and looked at me with terror in her eyes, but she said, "All right, Jake." When I returned, Mom was sitting in her normal chair in the family room. I went over and pulled the slats on the windows and switched on the lights in the room. Then I turned to her and said, "Karen, get up and take off your clothes," she added, looking at me with horror. "What did you hear me say about getting up and stripping?" "Oh, God. God, please don't make me do this, Jake. Please do it, Karen, or I'll come over there and rip them off you." Weeping and moaning, she stood and began to remove her clothes, but stopped when Karen was down to her bra and panties, and I could already see the red signs of cruelty on her body, crying as she removed her clothes, displaying whip and bite wounds. "Oh, God, Karen, how could you? How could you?" I was crying as I gazed at her. "I'm sorry, Jay, please. Forgive me. I couldn't help it. Go grab your robe and put it on. Then come back. We're going to chat and you'll have to make some decisions." My shirt sleeve felt tight again, and my stomach was in a knot as she exited the room. I took another half Valium, and when she returned with her robe on, I began to feel calmer. I waved her to her chair and I handed her the package with the pictures of her and said, "Take a look at these." I showed her the images. I included images of her, her parents, and our friends, considering how they'll be perceived by the divorce court. She didn't appear to see any of them as she hurriedly perused the photographs, her body shivering uncontrollably, sobbing as her eyes were full with tears. "Oh, God. Oh, God. What have I done? I'm so sorry. I want you to tell me about it. I don't want the gory details. Just tell me how it started and how many other affairs you've had if the kids are and if you love and want to go with your master John Harding, Jake. I've never had another affair. I love you and want to stay with you and our kids. The kids are yours, so don't turn me down. I need you now. I don't love him. I'm sorry for everything. I just want to be with you." I could feel my pulse racing in my chest, largely from rage. It was like a white-hot ball of fire in my gut, and volume did not appear to alleviate it. "Tell me the rest, and remember that if I find out you lied, I'll make you pay it all." Began 6 months ago when I took that 3-month course John Harding taught me and 3 other women who wanted to work part-time how to do the teller's job at the bank in a week-long course. I had difficulty catching on to some of the everything he was teaching, so he made me stay around after class to tutor me after the bank closed, which I was very grateful for. His desire to give me extra time, and I began to let him control me. I discovered I enjoyed it. I don't know why. One thing led to another, and I began to meet him in the evenings when you were out of town. We met at the motel near the airport, and he proceeded to make me pay for the room, and I felt awful. I felt cheap about what I was doing and wanted to quit, but he showed me a video he had taken of us together and what I was letting him do to me. He told me he'd send it to you if I didn't do what he wanted. I'm glad it's over. I want to get on with my life, but I genuinely need your aid to understand why I did what I did. I'm really sorry for everything. I love you and the kids so much that I can't bear the prospect of losing you. I believe you behaved so stupidly that I have a hard time believing you. How long did you think you could go without getting caught? Did you ever consider the repercussions? And I'm sure you'll agree that I and the kids were not taken into account while you were doing. I believe you're more remorseful for being caught than sorry for hurting us. How can I trust you again with every man you meet? Would be a candidate for a fresh affair. Oh no, Jake, no, I will never do anything so dumb again. Now you'll have to make a decision. I need your response by tomorrow morning. You have 2 options. You consent to complete custody and limited visitation rights, or 2. I release the Pies report with all the images to all of our relatives and friends, and let the world know what you are. Then you're free to continue your affair with your partner. I will agree not to divorce. You will have to quit your employment at the B, give a deposition to our lawyer regarding what you've done, and agree to certain constraints on your future activities. I'm offering you this option very reluctantly, but our kids are still young enough that they need a mother, and you are the ideal candidate. I will not make the Pie report public, but I'll keep it as a guarantee of your future faithfulness and respect for me. I also want you to get tested for STDs. Thank you for giving me another chance. I don't need your answer right now. I'll wait till the morning, when you'll be asleep. Spare room tonight, and for the foreseeable future, okay, Jake? I understand. I hope you do. I was up early after a sleepless night, and when I fell asleep, I had nightmares of standing on a high balcony, overlooking a bedroom and watching Karen take on a series of men. I couldn't find a way down to stop her and would wake up. Karen knocked on the door twice. In a cold sweat, and inquired if everything was okay. When she left, I heard her sob. As she proceeded down the hall, I was in the spare room, drinking a cup of decaf coffee in the kitchen before returning. Karen came in wearing an old nightgown and her robe, looking like she was getting ready for work. I hadn't slept much either, so I just stared at her without saying anything as she approached me. Jake, I'm very sorry, but I can't keep saying I'm sorry for the rest of my life. All I can do is show you that I mean it. I want to accept your offer to let me stay with you as your wife. I'll accept any terms you want to impose regarding my future actions. And I'll call on quitting my job at the bank effective immediately. You'll be my wife in name only. I don't plan to have sex with you. You'll be staying in the spare room indefinitely, and you'll be my children's maid and carer. You will receive a weekly stipend. I understand that I will be working as a maid and will be given an allowance to buy groceries and other essentials for the house. I'll come up with a cause for the kids to believe that I'm sleeping in the spare room, and I'll get ready for work. Sweetheart, can I make you breakfast before you leave? Oh, and you've lost the right to call me Jake or use any other terms of endearment. My name is Jake, and yes, you can have breakfast ready for me when I come down. When I arrived at work, I contacted Sam and instructed him to stop working on my case and asked how long it would take to acquire a final report on what he'd uncovered. He stated he'd have it done by the afternoon because everything was on his computer, including the images. He'd send me a copy and one to my lawyer, John Parker, via courier. I didn't know about that at the time, but I requested him not to reference anything. He agreed to include the video he'd recorded of my wife at her tryst in his report, but he did not question my motivations when I asked him to give it to me. He had enough evidence. I called John Parker and informed him on what Sam had, using the still shot to back up the report's conclusions. Finding out and that a copy, we scheduled an appointment for me and Karen to meet at his office the next day after he having an opportunity to read it. John, I want you to look at the report with the concept that I'd like to go after the bank. And John Harding, I'm bringing Karen tomorrow so you can listen. I'll read the report when it arrives and be prepared to debate it with you tomorrow. I also made some phone calls canceling joint credit cards and moved accounts to another bank during my lunch hour. I also put up our funds in my father's name as a trust fund for the children. When I came home that night, I brought my copy of the report with me after supper. While the kids were busy doing homework, I sat down with Karen in the family room and presented it to her. I didn't mention the video since I'd stopped to our new bank on my way home and read a safe deposit box for it. Karen was incredibly unhappy when she saw it and understood how thoroughly it had been prepared to chronicle her adultery. I don't know what to say, Jake. I just want you to know what I'll have in a safe. If you goof up again, I understand. I want you to come to John Parker's office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and be prepared to give a deposition concerning your affair with John Harding. You should also find a decent doctor and prepare an appointment to see him as soon as possible. Yes, I'll be there and will do whatever you say. I contacted the bank today. I quit my work. I didn't even try to contact John Harding. I also got the name of a psychiatrist today and the earliest I could get in to see him next week. My chest still felt tight, and I was still popping the volume periodically to try to keep things under control. I was beginning to feel gloomy and quite unhappy that night. More nightmares, and I feared I might need the services of a psychotherapist before this affair played out the next. I took the day off around 10 a.m. to meet Jane and Karen, who was driving her own car. I took the car to John's office. I informed my boss I was having some personal issues that needed to be resolved, and he was cool with it. Advised me to take the rest of the day off if I needed it. When I arrived at John's office, Karen was in the waiting room. Stepped in together, and John greeted us and beckoned us to chairs. I read Pye's report, and now I need to consult with Karen to establish what kind of case we might have to pursue against the bank, John Harding, any other folks involved. So Karen, why don't you tell me about it? John and the bank I'm going to try to destroy. John Harding and the bank should pay because it all started in their classroom. Karen discreetly turned her away. After a few minutes of shaking her shoulders and sobbing, she turned back, tears flowing down her face. I'm ready to tell you about it." Jen handed her a box of tissues, and after cleaning her eyes, she began telling John the same story. John paused for a time before replying, "I believe we have a case to pursue against the bank and John Harding and anybody else who may have been involved, especially if they were also employees of the bank. Karen, I need you to sign a deposition. I'll go over a few points you need to emphasize before passing you over to my secretary. Will transcribe your story, then we'll have you sign it and notarize your signature. Once that's done, I can proceed to have the bank, John Harding, and persons unknown served with the necessary papers. We're looking at a $10 million judgment, but I have to tell you that they will try to use the publicity to their advantage, and they will be just as eager to avoid some publicity. We'll also proceed to get John Harding fired and the return of any images or movies he has." After waiting for Karen, I concluded my deposition and went back to work. I pondered about going home, but I didn't want to be alone with Karen. When I thought about her, I felt the wrath building up again, and I couldn't stomach looking at her or being with her. So I began to consider parting from her as the best answer. Fix our situation, but the children needed a family, and I promised myself I'd stick it out, even though I knew I was heading. We lived together for a hard 2 months, and even when the wrath subsided, I found myself struggling with spells of depression that sometimes left me virtually paralyzed. I had to take a leave of absence from work as Karen started with her psychiatrist. I decided to visit one myself. It took another 2 months before he was able to modify my medication so I could almost function properly again and return to work. I know the children suffered because of my health and the poor relationship. After a year, our lives together improved to the point where Karen was sharing our bed again. We didn't try to have sex for a month or more, and I found myself impotent. Her when I tried to initiate intercourse, yet after the doctor gave Viagra, we were able to have sex again. Finally, we managed to settle into a regular husband and wife relationship, and I could give up my need on Viagra. Our family and our ties with others began to back to normal. In the meantime, our lawyer John Parker pursued legal action against the bank. The outcome was we achieved an OOT of court settlement with the bank for $3 million. The bank dismissed John Harding, and his wife divorced him. We won a judgment against him for $500,000, so he had to go away and start a new life in another state, to another employment, and to pay his alimony and child support. We received money from the bank and Harding and put the most of it in a trust for the children, designating John Parker as the administrator. Finally, I was able to lower my meds for sadness and anxiety, and we began marriage counseling. Karen learned from her doctor what drove me to become associated with John Harding and how should prevent allowing submissiveness get me into a similar predicament in the future. After a few years, our marriage resumed. The cozy connection we had enjoyed before her affair. I maintained closer watch on our actions than before. Karen never returned to work as we approached our 25th wedding anniversary. Our eldest son, Mark, had graduated from college, married, and had given us a grandson. Eric, Karen, and I were both doting grandparents. Sarah was a senior college and Lucas was a freshman. We were proud of them. A couple of weeks ago, on our 25th anniversary, I noticed a subtle shift in Karen's behavior and activities. I couldn't believe she was involved in another affair. After all these years, our sex life was still good. So I thought, why would she stray? I began to watch her more closely and checked her email account. She had attempted to hide it, but I discovered someone named Charles sent her emails thanking her for something he had done for him and begging her to meet him for a proper thank you. Her responses were initially non-committal, but he kept on at her until she finally agreed to meet him at a hotel room on the Saturday evening before our anniversary, which fell on the following Monday. He told her he had reserved room 524 at the hotel and would meet her there at 6:30 p.m. My chest pains were, along with my depression and rage. How could she be unfaithful to me again? I had already made reservations for us, an anniversary dinner on Monday, and I began to think of it as a farewell dinner for our marriage. I decided I wouldn't hire a pie this time, but rather confront her with her lover at the hotel and then proceed from there. On Saturday morning, she informed me that I was going to the hospital that evening for a couple of hours to visit a sick friend. I acted as naturally as possible, nodding to appreciate her information, and went back to reading the morning paper. The day passed slowly. I had to search till I discovered my old container of Valium. To keep myself calm around 6 o'clock p.m., Karen left, and after waiting half an hour, I followed her to the hotel. When I got there, I thought about how I was going to gain entry. I found an old baseball cap and jacket in the trunk of my car. I took them with me and went into the hotel. It was an upscale hotel and sold cut flowers in the shop off the lobby. I bought a large bouquet and took the elevator to the 5th floor finding room 524. I put on the helmet and jacket, and putting the flowers in front of my face, I knocked on the door. I felt my heart beating in my chest as I waited. I was a nervous wreck. "Who is it?" I heard Karen asked via the door. "Floral delivery, ma'am." I answered, attempting to conceal my voice. I heard the door unlatch and she looked out. "I didn't order any flowers. You may have the wrong room." I dropped the flowers and shoved my way into the room. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Oh, Jake, you're right on time. There isn't anyone. I just did that to get you down here. The kids are putting on an anniversary meal for us tonight, and they wanted to surprise you." Immediately put on your I saw a suit on the bed, so I went over and checked in the bathroom to make sure she was alone. Then I turned around to look at her, and she was standing there smiling at me. My mind went numb for a few seconds, and then something snapped. I felt the wrath swelling up inside me. What the hell had she done? She knew about the difficulties I'd had years earlier getting over her affair. Why did she use a similar situation to drag me down here, just as I was about to lay into her? I started to lose consciousness and felt myself sinking and sliding into a deep abyss. I heard Karen cry out, "Jake," before everything went black. So now it was the next day, and I was in an ICU unit at the local hospital. I was exposed to a battery of tests that morning, and while waiting to hear the findings, I visited with my son Mark, Sarah, and Lucas, who were home looking after their mother. "My wife is sedated because she doesn't understand why you're furious at her and why you won't speak to her." "Mark, I'm thinking about getting a divorce from your mom. Is why I want to talk with John Parker's father." "Why? What did she do to make you want to do that?" "Do you know how your mother got me to the hotel?" "She just said she'd get." "Before I begin the story, could you perhaps explain why your mother was involved in the dinner plans she discovered out when Lucas mistakenly left the folder with our hotel costs and other data in it, which very much warned us? We were planning, so we decided to surprise you anyhow. She stated she'd be responsible for having you in the banquet room by 7 o'clock, so we left that portion up to her. It all goes back to when you were 12 years old. I didn't realize it at the time, but I found out your mother had a serious affair after I had. I had a severe mental breakdown and was out of work and in treatment for months. I was grateful that the corporation kept my employment until I was back on my feet. I never really forgiven your mother for that. But we got back to. I used to have absolutely uncontrolled rages towards your mother, but now we're rather comfortable with each other, and at times despaired of continuing a relationship together. It's taken a long time to get me here. Your mother decided to manufacture a new lover and that she was going to have a tryst with at the hotel on Saturday evening. I collapsed. For that, when I went to the hotel room to confront her and her partner, I had a panic attack. I'm so angry at her that if I wasn't sedated, I'd probably die or kill her. I can only presume that your mother, as a normal, rational person, had to understand what would happen and was hoping I'd suffer a heart attack and leave her with all of our assets and no one living. I had no knowledge about this romance when I was younger. You were ill for a long period, and I didn't know what was going on till now. It's difficult to imagine she would do something like you're suggesting, but I can't see how she could. Ignore your previous troubles. If I seek for divorce, I will give the complete tale. I'll give your mother a chance in a few days to explain me why she sought to get. I went to that hotel room, and there were other ways she may have done the same thing, Dad. I hope this does not result in divorce. I hope you consider it. It will rely on your mother's rationality when I see her later today." The cardiologist arrived to the ICU. "My son Lucas was with me, Mr. Thompson, and I have wonderful news for you. Your heart is fine. We may shift you into a standard room for the night, and you should be home tomorrow. It appears like you've had a shock to the system that forced you to turn out your information indicates a history of mental stress. Thus, you should definitely visit a. If you continue to be stressed, you may develop cardiac problems. Thank you, doctor. Going home is a mixed blessing for me because that's where the source of my problem dwells. Figure that out, maybe with some marriage counseling. I've gone down that road before, and it didn't work for me. Professional opinion, you're physically able to leave the hospital. You should discover a means to avoid a repeat of what caused your problem. Thanks for your help. Doctor. After the doctor went, I turned to Lucas and asked, do you know if Mark got hold of John Parker? I neglected to inform you that Dad Parker will meet you as soon as you are able. I'll phone and see if I can get in. To see him tomorrow morning. I murmured, grabbing for the phone. I was able to make an appointment with Jan for 10 o'clock a.m. The nurse arrived the next morning and began preparing me to be transported out of the ICU after. Checking out the next morning, Mark took me to John Parker's office, where we had a meeting with him. I hear. You've Jake stated I've got some of your old troubles back, Jake. I'm going to have to do something about it. I thought I would. Put the early episode to rest. But she's done something that has brought it all back. I'm not sure she did it. I carefully told him what had created my troubles. What do you think we should do? Jake, I would like you to initiate divorce proceedings based on infidelity. Do you have any new evidence? That she's having another affair? No, I want to proceed based on the affair she had 13 years ago. The judge will go along with that. Jake, you've been living with Karen, has been married to him for 13 years. He presumably will not accept the divorce petition because there is no proof she is still having an affair. I don't care. I want to make it public so everyone knows about her adultery and find out more about her affair. If he turns it down, we can try again. I'd propose getting a divorce or separation on other grounds, but I'd also like to cause her some pain. She abandoned her affair when I caught her 13 years ago because I believed the kids needed a mother and a family. I didn't divulge the specifics of her affair because I didn't want to upset the family. The only pain she experienced was, in the short term, I was able to return to a regular life, but I've been suffering for years. She's brought it all back, and I want to bring her misery because of what she did. And for her affair, the children are older. Now that custody isn't an issue, and they're old enough that the circumstances of her affair won't traumatize them. Be very expensive, Jake. Are you sure you want to proceed this way? I'm absolutely sure, but I'm going home now, and I'll have to confront Karen unless she can offer me a good explanation for her recent conduct. I'm not sure what she could say that would justify her conduct, but I'll listen in the interim. Please proceed with the divorce based on her previous. Okay, Jake, I'll follow your instructions. Thank you, John. We went outdoors and got up with Karen inside. She was sitting in the living room waiting for us. She seemed to be in a lot of pain, so I was delighted to see her finally looking like she was hurting. I waved the children over to sit down while I spoke. I tried to stay calm and keep my emotions in check as I said hello to Karen. Sitting across from her, I'm here to discuss. Hello, Jake, she said with tears running down her cheeks. David has informed me why you're furious with me. What I want to convey is that I wish had a rational justification for what I did. I should have known better, but I didn't because I thought it was a big joke that we may laugh about later. I'm asking you to forgive me for not employing greater judgment in doing what I did. Just didn't anticipate the consequences of my actions, Karen. Your joke could have killed me, and I can't help but think it was deliberate, Jake. I want you to know that I don't love you and never wanted to grow old with you. You have a hilarious technique of showing love. I believe you killed me because you wanted to keep your prior affair hidden. If I were gone, you would have our marriage assets to yourself and could indulge your kinky side. I am not without sexual cravings, Jake, but I'm not apologetic. I'm not in the mood for kinky sex again, and I don't need any more money. I hope the report of my affair never comes to light, but I would never try to kill you to keep it a secret. The kids are old enough to know about our dilemma, so they can prevent making the same mistakes in their future. The thing is, I couldn't keep going through life worried about you having another affair. I keep thinking that I'm the wrong party in all of this. I've absorbed the brunt of the hurt for your actions. Perhaps I'm coming across as doing this for revenge, and that's what I need for closure. But you so easily ignored the problems I had following your affair and the months and years of therapy I went through to conquer it. I'm shocked you do something like this, and I give you the benefit of the doubt, but I believe you planned this. You haven't convinced me that it was an accident, so I'm instructing John Parker to pursue getting a divorce from you based on adultery. I'd recommend you get a lawyer. Adultery, Jake, I haven't. Since my affair, I told myself that I would remain faithful to you, and I have kept that commitment. I'm basing the charge of adultery on your affair 13 years ago. Please, Jake, don't do that, or I'll grant you a divorce. What you want, but don't base it on something I did 13 years ago. I'd be saddened if the report was filed public. I'm sorry, Karen, but that's how it's going to be. I want you to suffer. I'm sad to hear you're departing. During a difficult moment, I believe your lawyer should contact John Parker. I'm going to pack a few items and relocate to a motel. I'll come back and retrieve the rest of my stuff once I find a flat. Do you have anything to say, kids? Up. Out this, I inquired, glancing at each of them. Mark answered, Dad, I'm worried you're being terribly vindictive to base a divorce on. This happened 13 years ago, and I don't see how you could have accidentally done something so dumb. I wish the whole thing hadn't happened. I'll regret trying to arrange up a surprise anniversary dinner for you. The rest of my life, I hate to think I or any of us had a hand in your splitting up. Maybe after things calm down, you'll find a way to get back together, Mark. I stated what you did was respectable and the proper thing to do, kids. Don't blame yourselves for that. It could have happened at another moment. I'm going up to pack as I went. Karen sat quietly crying upstairs, and our kids were attempting to console her. Later, I took my car to a motel nearby. My work, where I settled for what I anticipated would only be a week's stay before finding a more permanent locati. Zero in. The conflict was over, and things were beginning to approach a conclusion by the time I had my conversation with Karen. It was evident. After our marriage ended, I got a furnished flat near my workplace and moved in right away. Then I went to my. Karen sat in the kitchen while I was picking up the rest of my belongings and moving them to my new flat. But we didn't speak. She simply sat there looking drawn, and a week after I walked out, John filed for divorce in court. A legal notice with a hearing date was published in the local newspaper, and I heard from several of our friends who were unaware of Split recalling her house and asking Karen what was going on. The child claimed she spent a lot of time sobbing and began to avoid answering the phone. I felt satisfaction that she was beginning to suffer some pain. I was genuinely saddened at the divorce hearing. The judge authorized my divorce case based on infidelity. The kids were outraged and refused to speak to me. Karen was allocated the house and the divorce settlement for the next 2 years. She quickly sold it and went to a condo. Heard that she rarely went out and was virtually a recluse. She didn't date in her new freedom and barely saw any of our old acquaintances. Her parents and our children were her only meaningful contacts with the outside world. All closure to a bad time in my life. I was missing the company of marriage, but I felt pleased. I questioned whether I went too far in inflicting her agony. What would you have done in Jake's situation? Tell us in the comments. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more astonishing tales.